All right, folks, this one got a chuckle out of me. Apparently, the Hill newspaper in Washington, D.C., filed a Freedom of Information Act request to have the audio of, what was his name? Robert Hur, something? The special counsel who was appointed to investigate the classified documents that were found in Joe Biden's Corvette in his garage. Who, for those of you who don't remember, there was a push to investigate the classified documents that were left in Joe Biden's house after Mar-a-Lago got raided and Trump was getting prosecuted for possessing classified documents in his house. And so in order to avoid looking hypocritical, they appointed this special counsel who's supposed to look into it and determine whether or not Biden should be prosecuted like Trump is. And of course, the special counsel came to the conclusion that Biden should not be prosecuted. And the way that he wrote his report, it seemed like he was saying, actually, I think he kind of overtly said it, that if you put Joe Biden in front of a jury, they probably wouldn't convict him because he would come across as a senile old man who sincerely had no intention of wrongdoing. Because essentially, Biden was not mentally fit to really understand the nature of the crime, and so since this is a crime where intentionality plays a big point, and that was something that as part of Trump's defense. His defense is that, or was going to be before this whole situation blew up, as I discussed last week, with the revelation that the FBI had tampered with the evidence. Trump's defense was going to be that, hey, these documents and these folders, they'd never even been opened. I never saw what was in them, so I had no idea that there was classified stuff in there. And so how could I intentionally have taken classified documents out of the White House when these are documents that were sent to my home by the White House that I never even opened? They were just stuffed in a closet. Well, the special counsel investigating the case as it relates to Joe Biden and the classified documents in his possession, he said that Joe Biden, seemed to genuinely just not understand and not remember what was going on. He couldn't even remember when he was vice president. And so it seemed it was abundantly clear from the report that the president has memory issues, and so you couldn't prove that he intentionally took classified documents, from the White House and put them, in his own home. So fast forward, the Hill newspaper wants to hear the audio to see if the special counsel's interpretation of the events is accurate. If it actually sounds like Joe Biden, just was totally out of it and senile. And the Biden administration, Joe Biden himself, asserted executive privilege to block transparency, to block the Freedom of Information Act request, saying, no. I, the president, will not allow you to hear this, which is all but confirming that this audio is exactly what we think it is, and it is audio of Joe Biden stumbling and bumbling about like a senile old man who has no idea where he is. And so Joe Biden is so sure that this is going to be a negative, that this would be such a negative story for him if this audio got out, that he's willing to, draw potentially more attention to the whole situation by blocking its release and censoring the press, trampling on government transparency, all to protect his own vain image. It's really quite remarkable. It's not like this will have an overall impact on the election, but it does give us a pretty good. I think it settles once and for all the debate over whether or not Joe is. Whether he's lost his marbles. I want to stop short of making any medical diagnosis because I know that YouTube is very sensitive about medical disinformation, and so I didn't want to say use any medical terms. So let's just say he's lost his marbles. They just spilled out all over the dining room floor. They're strewn about. And so Trump supporters, they're not going to care that Joe Biden is senile. He's senile. They were going to vote for Trump anyway. Biden voters, they don't care because they know he's senile. They knew he was senile in 2020. There were articles written in the mainstream media talking about how they did not need Joe Biden to be mentally well. They didn't even need Joe Biden to live throughout his 4 years. They just needed his corporeal form. They needed to have something to put on the ballot in November of 2020. He was essentially a placeholder, and even more so now, 4 years later. 4 years as president, it's not good for anyone's health. It's certainly not good for the health of a man who was already showing signs of slipping. And yes, I'm not here to say like, oh, Joe Biden is so old and and Donald Trump is so young and vibrant. I think that Donald Trump, it's fair to say, you compare to Joe Biden, they're close to the same age. They're pretty much the same age, those two guys. Donald Trump is very clearly, in much better shape mentally. He's a lot sharper than Joe Biden. He seems to have a lot more energy, sure, but Donald Trump is still ancient. Pretty sure I'd have to double check both their ages now. Actually, yeah, I think even if Trump is president for, let's say, another 4 years from now, I think he still won't be as old as Biden is now, right? Is that correct? I can't remember. These guys, once you get to a certain point, the ages blend together. But anyway, they're old. And that has its own problems. But, for Trump, the problems of him being an old man is that he can't change his ways. He can't learn from mistakes. He can't improve. He is what he is. He is old and set in his ways. Joe Biden, on the other hand, is a sack of potatoes. And so, you're not going to get me up here preaching the virtues of voting for Donald Trump. I think that Donald Trump is running the worst campaign of his life. I think that this is worse than 2016, definitely, and worse than 2020, as far as just his own messaging. I get absolutely, the few times that I hear from Trump, he's telling me things that are not that are having the opposite effect of making me want to vote for him. Every time Trump opens his mouth this year, the few times that I've heard anything from him, it's things that I don't like. And it's not like he doesn't have good points. If he wanted, if he was running on different issues, he could very much win my vote. But as of right now, nobody's looking great. I don't think I need to outline why Joe Biden is a terrible president and why I don't want to see him reelected. Trump has a lot of good points that, frankly, he chooses not to highlight. He seems to highlight all of his worst points. All of his worst impulses seems to be what gets put front and center. RFK Jr. Likewise has a lot of good points. As a person, and positions and integrity. But he seems to be running as like the most. Is like the biggest Zionist, which is just, it's weird. I don't get it. Like, you're not going to out Zionist Trump and Biden. Somehow Joe Biden, who historically was one of the most pro-Zionist Democrats, is now somehow like the least pro-Israel candidate in the race. I don't know how that happens. I don't know how Trump and, well, I know how Trump did it, but I mean RFK Jr. How do you run to the more pro-Israel? How do you suck up to Netanyahu more, than Biden? And I'm not saying that because Biden is Netanyahu's best friend in 2024. Clearly, Netanyahu would like to see someone else be president other than Joe Biden. But historically, by American political standards, Biden has pretty much okayed just about anything that Israel does. He's been a very, very loyal servant to the state of Israel. And at a time when there is a war between Israel and the people of Gaza that is completely funded by the United States, that is being fought with American weapons, that has killed apparently 35,000 people. Obviously, the Palestinians and the Israelis differ on the casualty rate as what percentage of those are combatants versus civilians. The Palestinians would argue that the vast majority of the deaths have been civilians. The Israelis argue that it's closer to a 50-50 split, but still a majority civilians. Netanyahu most recently said that they've killed like 14,000 fighters and like 16,000 civilians. So they both agree it's like 30 to 35,000 people dead since last October. Okay, so we're way less than a year. This government has also perpetuated the bloodbath in Ukraine. Before that, our government perpetrated a genocide in Yemen. And to me, these aren't minor little things that I can just ignore and say, well, I'm focused on domestic policy. It's like, no, it really affects us when our government has a hand in slaughtering tens of thousands of people, or hundreds of thousands in the case of Yemen in most recent times, or like 1 million people in the case of Iraq. And these countries just, it's like the USA is like the meme of the Grim Reaper, knocking on the door, and each doorway before that he's already knocked on is has blood spilled everywhere. To me, I think it's I don't think it's a very hard call to say we should stop doing that, and that has made us much less safe. And so I can't really, it's hard for me to see any of these people as legitimate when they're calling for that. It's like RFK Jr., as much as I dislike a lot about him, if he'd just been solid on that stuff, he might have been able to win me over. Probably still not, because there's enough differences. I would be still pretty afraid of him running the bureaucracy and the kinds of people he would appoint, the kinds of stuff that would happen at like the EPA, for example. I would be very nervous about RFK Jr. being able to select those bureaucrats. But hey, if we could bring the troops home, he might be able to convince me. But he's not doing that. He wants to go all in on Israel, and it's like, if you're against the other wars, and it's like, but you're pro the war in Israel, it's like, in principle, I don't understand like where your position is. If you're willing to go all in on this war, not just a little bit, a lot, where do you draw the line elsewhere? So that's kind of where we stand. Oh, and RFK also, even though, again, he's physically in good shape, he's really old. All three of these guys. Not that RFK Jr. would ever win, obviously, but he could win he's good in AIM ID. He could win a less than 10%, let's say. He could win high single digits, I think, of the vote, which would certainly be enough to affect the outcome of the race. He's not a Ross Perot. He doesn't have Ross Perot money. He doesn't have Ross Perot charisma. But he's not just, another Gary Johnson or something like that, or a Jill Stein. So with that said, I will see you folks back here in the next one.